profusely and unreservedly for the delayed start. Colleagues in the media, thank you very much for your patience. We do appreciate your time. Honorable Ministers, Minister Mbalula, Minister Godang, Minister Mutwaledi, thank you very much for availing yourself for this briefing. Deputy Minister Magadzi, a very good evening to you, ma'am. Thank you very much for your time. Please allow me to also greet the Directors General here present, as well as the heads of entities, SACA, AXA, and ATNS, the executives, the management, the staff, members of the aviation industry who've joined us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, thank you very much. I will not be long at all. I'm going to try and redeem the time as much as possible. Minister Mbalula, I think let me hand over to you, sir.
1, 2. 1, 2. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. In the coronavirus, the mic. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen of the media, our colleagues. We are here at the airport as one center, OR Tambo, that receive a lot of people from far field in the world. And this past weekend, drastic measures were announced by the President. As departments, we have been responding to that. And in this center that we're in, key departments of government that operate from here, it is transport, which have got its entities, ATNS, AXA, and SACA, which are key in terms of what happens here at the airport and dealing with the regulations and everything here. And the Minister Mtwaledi deals with border control in the country as the Minister of Home Affairs. And we have the Minister of Public Enterprises, who some of the airlines are under him, and probably you will have some of the questions you want to ask in relation to that. But the main theme of this briefing, because we have been inundated by inquiries left and right about the ban. We all know that every ban and anything that has happened in this environment is affecting the economy negatively and so on. But the inundated questions were not negative as such. It's for people seeking clarity on the implication of the ban on their travel and from where. And a ban is a ban. And that is what it is. It's not only South Africa that has imposed a ban. Many countries across the world have done that. In this instance, we have restricted it to certain countries that have been on the high list of the infected. So we are dealing with that in terms of this statement. Cabinet at its extraordinary meeting of Sunday, the 15th March 2020, declared COVID-19 a national disaster. Following the declaration of the disease as a world pandemic by the World Health Organization, aviation is one of the high-risk subsectors of transport, which enables high levels of mobility and by extension the rapid spread of the coronavirus. As a sector, we are continuously putting in place measures to mitigate the risks. Assessment exercises have been carried out across all our airports in accordance with WHO advisory to ensure that screening measures to limit the risk of exportation or importation of the disease are implemented. Since then, the airport company has procured and distributed masks. The Civil Aviation Authority has issued guidelines for infection control for all airlines, handling, and so on. We have dealt with that extensively yesterday. Of importance is the fact that Cabinet resolved, as announced by the Honorable President, that travel restrictions to the currently identified high-risk countries, including South Korea, Italy, Spain, Iran, Germany, United States of America, United Kingdom, and China. We are currently seized with the finalization of the regulations that will legally support the implementation and the enforcement of this regulation. We'll finalize these regulations by the end of business today, working with the following entities of the Department of Transport, SACA, Civil Aviation, AXA, and the ATNS Airport Traffic. These regulations will then be gazetted tomorrow, like we announced in the media briefing of cabinet ministers yesterday, that as of the 18th, the travel ban in terms of the declaration, by the president, or as announced by the president, will kick in tomorrow. So these regulations will then be gazetted tomorrow in a special gazette. The regulations provide for a ban of passenger air travel from the countries listed above. They will provide powers for the aviation entities to have the power to prevent, decline authorizations for aircraft to land. The applicable laws provide for the minister to consult the aviation entities in the drafting of such regulations. I've directed that the staff of the Department of Transport and those of the entities should work tirelessly to complete this work by tonight, to enable us to implement the ban as announced by the President. Once the regulations are gazetted, the ministerial order will be communicated to AXA and the other entities for implementation, with the effective date indicated and included therein. Official communication will be made in line with the relevant protocols by the entities to all affected countries and foreign nationals. The exception to this rule will be the diplomats serving in South Africa in line with the provisions of the Vienna Convention. This will be treated the same way that returning South African citizens are treated, but can't be refused entry back home. In anticipation of the implementation of these regulations and the enforcement of the travel bans, the entities in aviation have now finalized their implementation plans. The Department of Transport has reviewed these plans and approved them. These operational plans include, among other measures, summarized as: 1, should the foreign nationals from the high-risk countries be airborne and land in the country, ATNS together with AXA will follow the process that they have in place, where the aircraft will be redirected to a remote parking apron and the relevant authorities will be notified. Meaning, if there is anyone from the countries that have been banned actually found in one of the aircraft, this will actually apply. 2, in a case where some of the passengers from high-risk countries arrive in South Africa connecting or transiting to other neighboring countries, the airport authorities, Port Health, together with the immigration team, will conduct a robust assessment and do a thorough travel history checks to implement quarantine where required. 3, it is important to note that all South African citizens returning from high-risk countries, Port Health Services will conduct health checks, including the clinical assessment and quarantine. And part of this work has already been happening. If you are at this airport, you're coming from outside, you will see Port Health workers at work in terms of our airports. 4, charter operators will be rerouted to international airports that have the Port Health capability to manage a suspected case. The following international airports have the necessary capacity and will be ready to handle charter flights. 1, OR Tambo, Lanseria, Kinshasa, Upington, Polokwane, Bramfisher and Bloemfontein, Kruger, Mpumalanga International, Pilanesberg, Port Elizabeth, and Cape Town. It is very important to note that the biggest denominator on us implementing quarantine will be based on travel history not nationality. This process also deals with stigma issues that should be eliminated from this process. This is time for solidarity, not stigmatization. Since the travel ban announcements, some of the airlines have already started cancelling their scheduled flights and have notified the affected passengers accordingly. I will now give over to Minister Mtwaledi to speak on border control.
Can you give me my notes, dear? Yeah, thank you very much, Minister. I think.
Yeah, continue.
Yeah, there is really nothing new more than what we have said yesterday, but there are two issues which the President has announced which affect the Department of Home Affairs. Firstly is the closure of borders, and secondly is to deal with the issues of visas from the countries that have been named, which Minister Mbalula elaborated upon. Now, let me start with borders. As you know, South Africa has got 72 ports of entry, 53 of which are land ports of entry, 11 are airports, which he has also enumerated here, and 8 are seaports. Now, when we closed, we looked at all of them one by one individually. I mean, when we talked about closure, none of the 11 airports are going to be interfered with. They are going to work as they normally do. There will only be heightened activity and vigilance, obviously by port health authorities and immigration officials. Coming to the seaports, we are going to leave 6 as they are, also with heightened activity, a lot of activity from port health authorities and immigration officials. But we are going to timber with 2 seaports, that's Saldanha Bay and Mossel Bay. There, they will continue their freight activities, but they won't be allowed to offload passengers. There won't be any embarkation of passengers or exchange of crew. Exchange of crew means a situation where somebody who has been at sea for a very long time arrived at that port of entry. They come offshore and a fresh team gets on and the ship goes past. We will no longer allow that to happen. Only goods will be transported in Mossel Bay and Saldanha Bay. Now, coming to the 53 land ports of entry, our selection criteria were very clear. Number one, those ports of entry, land ports of entry, where there's no commercial activity at all. You will just find people and cars passing through, but there's no commercial activity taking place. That's number one. Number two, those where not only for this disease, but even from the past, have never had airport authorities which could check for health issues. They've never had them before. When you go to those ports of entry, you just find Home Affairs official who stamp passports, and you find SAPS, South African Police Service, and nothing else. Those are 35 in number. And those are the ones which actually we have already closed them. I'm no longer talking about we're going to. We have already started closing them. And today I was signing letters to the ministers of our neighboring countries, after having spoken to them yesterday, by the way, because one have to inform them. So out of the 35, out of these 53 ports of entry, the biggest number we have got is with Botswana. We've got 17 ports of entry with Botswana, and we'll allow 5 of them operational. I hope I'm not missing my numbers. speaking from the yes. And then we have got one port of entry with Zimbabwe, that's Beit Bridge. And obviously we can't close that one, otherwise we'll have cut off South Africa from the rest of the continent. At any rate, there's no country where we have closed completely altogether. We close a certain number and there's a number that still remain functioning. We have got 4 ports of entry with Mozambique. Unfortunately, we have to close 3 of them, remain with only 1, the Libombo border post between us and Mozambique. We have got 11 ports of entry with Eswatini. We're going to close 6 of them and remain with 5. We have got 14 ports of entry with Lesotho. We're going to close 9 of them and remain with 5. We have got 6 ports of entry with Namibia. We're going to close 4 of them and remain with 2. Basically, that's what we are busy doing. Now, coming to the issue of visas. When we checked immigration laws, we found that to ban travelers from the countries that were mentioned by the president, the only mechanism you can do so is via a visa. You can't just tell somebody, don't come to South Africa. We have got to do it via visas. Now, many of you might have noticed that most of the countries that the president has mentioned on that list, there are only 2 countries that used to need visas to come to South Africa. It's China and Iran. The other countries mentioned, Italy, Germany, France, USA, UK, they were all South Korea, Hong Kong, Portugal, they were all coming visa-free in South Africa. Now, what we have done is, starting with China and Iran, the visas we have already issued, and from January to, between January and February, excluding March, because in March the embassies were already closed anyway. But during that time when our embassies were still open, in January and February, we had issued 8,000 visas, 8,000 plus to China, and we are having to revoke them. In other words, the people who are still holding those visas, who have not yet visited, we are going to revoke them. For Iran, it's about 425 visas, which we have issued in January and February. We are going to have to revoke them. Now, the other countries that were coming from visa-free will have to start applying for visas. That is UK, Germany, France, Italy, USA, UK. For Hong Kong, Singapore, and South Korea, because they are, no. South Korea is not part of those. Those who are of medium risk, yes, I think it's Hong Kong and Singapore. I'll check the third one. We are going to also ask them to apply for visas, but specifically, not to deny them entry, but specifically in the visa requirement, we want a certificate that they've undergone a test and they were found to be coronavirus free in those tests. If they present that certificate as part of the visa application, we'll certainly allow them in. The other countries, they will have to apply for visas, and as Minister Mbalula have said, depending on the history where they've been and not nationality. But we know that obviously British people have been in Britain most of the time. German people have been in Germany. So it will more or less correspond. But we won't necessarily chase you just because you are a German. If you have not been in Germany, you have been in South Africa or in Kenya or another country, we won't chase you simply because of your nationality. I think that's what he meant. But that will be defined when they start applying for passports. Yes, thank you very much. Yes, the countries which I said I didn't correctly mention the third one. where they will apply for visa specifically for the requirement to produce a certificate is Portugal, Hong Kong, and Singapore. Yes, those ones, we want them to apply specifically because we want them to provide the certificate. Once it's provided, everything is clear. But the other countries, South Korea, Spain, Germany, United States of America, United Kingdom, they will have to apply for a visa and will have to grant it. If we don't grant it, then they cannot come. Minister Mbalula will have decided whether the planes from there must land or not. If they land from any other plane and we check from the passport and find that they are from those countries, then they won't be allowed visas, they won't be allowed in. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister. I'm going to ask for assistance moving the microphone so that we can hear from Minister Pravin Gordon, please. Essay and the colleague, I don't know if you can move the media mics there just for a second. Thank you very much, colleagues.
I'm supposed to be the choir boy. That's okay. I don't have as important set of things to say, but good evening to all of you. Of the high-risk countries, if I'm right, Germany, US, UK, and China have direct flights from their respective countries to South Africa. So these entry requirements and visa requirements are those that apply to those airlines, and they'll have to take the necessary precautions in that regard. In relation to the medium-risk countries, Hong Kong and Singapore, Hong Kong through Cathay Airways and Singapore through Singapore Airlines also have direct flights to South Africa. Now the importance of this is that every day, in fact every few hours, airlines throughout the world are making decisions about whether they are sustainable, whether they should continue to fly. Many airlines that are global in character and nature have grounded more than 50% of their planes. Some are thinking of increasing them to 60% and 70% as well. And as far as SAA is concerned, and of course you know that SAA is in business rescue, they've been getting requests as of the last few days to actually consider taking on passengers from some of the airlines that fly directly to South Africa, which means that that's an early sign that some of those airlines might actually consider reviewing their position as far as flying to South Africa is concerned. SAA itself flies to Frankfurt, Munich, London, New York, Washington, Perth. I think Hong Kong they don't do anymore, in Sao Paulo. And each of those will also be under review. But what we need to emphasize to the South African public is that airlines throughout the world are in huge financial difficulties. European airlines have asked for over 50 to 70 billion euros of the EU to support them to survive. US airlines have asked their governments $50 billion in order to survive as they understand their problems right now. And some predict that the airline industry in its current form won't be existing beyond May this year. So that's the kind of difficulty that the coronavirus or COVID-19 has actually created. The last point I want to make is that there are South Africans who are in various parts of the world who want to come back to South Africa, and they are citizens of countries that I've outlined and others who want to get back to their countries. So whilst these bans take effect on the 18th, the repatriation process, both here in South Africa and elsewhere in the world, will happen for a few days beyond that period, well, and possibly into next week as well, to ensure that, for example, South African citizens who want to come back into South Africa are able to do so, but similarly citizens of the UK, US, or Germany who want to get back to their home countries are able to do so as well. So this repatriation process is an important process that's taking place at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the media, we're absolutely spoiled for choice today. We not only have the three ministers, we also have directors general here. We also have the deputy minister, the heads of the various entities concerned. So the questions may be directed at a particular politician, but may be fielded on an operational level by any one of the CEOs who are with us this evening. With that said, let's open up for a round of questions. I'm going to ask DM that you please slide me the microphone that's right there. Let's take it to the floor, and I think Betty can assist us with the roving mic. Thank you very much. Colleagues, you know the drill, name and media house, and then you shoot. Thanks. Malu's right here in front. Perhaps let's start with Malungelo. Thank you.
Good evening. Switch off one.
My name is Malungelo Boy from Newsroom Africa. Minister Motsoaledi, my question is directed to you. I want to find out, in some of the ports of entry, for example, in the borders in the one in the northwestern Botswana, for example, when you're screening people there, have you already put in officials to do that? And if somebody has been found to have COVID-19, what happens there? Thank you.
Vitumala Masitlaho from Tourism Update and Travel News Weekly. My question is to Minister Motsoaledi. In terms of the visas and the visas that are being revoked, what happens to the foreign nationals who are already in the country, who are from high-risk countries? How will they be able to get home, and will they be able to renew their visas, or will they be given a certain period of time should they have trouble getting back home?
Thank you so much. Francis Machate from Progressive Independent News Agency. My question also goes to Minister Motsoaledi. On the ports the ports of entries that you are closing some and some you are opening, what is the strategy there? Why do you not completely close them? How are you going to control the spread of virus or the transportation of virus into the country? And another one will be about you did not mention the issue on the cargo flights. Are they still allowed from even the countries that are banned? Oh, not banned, but are not really allowed to be ferrying people into the country?
Thank you. Bonga Lulane from EWN. I'll start with you, Minister Mbalula. Why are South Africans who are coming from most affected areas facing possible quarantine, not compulsory? I don't know if I got that wrong. Maybe you could just clear that for me, please. And then, Minister Motsoaledi, you said from those who are applying for visas, you'll need a certificate. Is this from everyone applying for a visa, or the ones from high-risk countries? Why not simply not giving them the visa in the beginning, if it's high-risk countries? And number three, for me, I don't know if someone or AXA can answer this. What does this mean for AXA as an entity? I mean, the president had said that this is the first challenge we've dealt with since the dawn of democracy. So a crisis like this, when flights, some of them don't fly, where does it put AXA, particularly when it comes to the financial stability of the whole institution? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's take one more hand. There's a lady right at the back there. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Arissa. I'm here from Media 24. This is just a question for Minister Mbalula. We would like to know, so at the airports, will crew members from the high-risk countries still be allowed? And if someone gets on a plane tonight from any of these high-risk countries, will they still be allowed in the country tomorrow?
Thank you so much. Okay, is my mic on? One must
Be off. Oh, there we go. Thank you so much. I think perhaps we should start with you, Minister Motsoaledi. The bulk of the questions were directed at you, sir.
Earlier, but later, everybody has got questions.
Thank you. Thanks, Manu.
Yeah. Yes, let me start with the question from Malungelo Boy.
Yes, Minister.
The people who
Sorry, Minister, I'm going to ask that we give you a handheld as well because we're going to struggle to hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, the people who run around to check your temperature, health, your status are not Home Affairs officials, because Home Affairs officials are not trained on health issues. These are Port Health authorities employed by the Department of Health. Most of them are what you call environmental care specialists. In the past, when I was still a small boy, they used to be called health inspectors, but the terminology has changed. Those are the ones you see going around. I understand the Department of Health is also including nurses now, because they've just hired 90 extra. Now, those 90, instead of sending them to all the borders and spread them thinly, we send them to high impact, like here at OR Tambo. You know, if you look at the airports, OR Tambo, Kinshasa, and Cape Town, they account for 80% of the passenger load. So when you hire extra workers, instead of distributing them all over, you send them to high impact. And so those are Port Health people. They know exactly what to do when they found you with a temperature. They know where to report to. They've got protocols that they'll follow. It's only that they are working together with immigration officials there. For instance, if they believe that somebody must be turned back home, it's the immigration officials who will do that job, but will have been instructed by the health experts. You know, the foreign nationals that are already in South Africa. Look, there are lots of foreign nationals in South Africa. Some are on long-term study visas. If you are studying a 6-year degree at the medical school, we give you a 6-year visa. If you are studying a 3-year degree or 4-year degree, we give you those visas for what you call long-term visas. So if you are on a long-term visa, you are just like us. You are basically just like a South African, because you have been here for a long time. Now, if those visas expire, we are prepared to extend them. It's very important. But if somebody says, I want to go back home, we can't stop any human being from going back to their own home. But if he says, look, I understand the situation back at home in my country, for instance, in Italy, it's so bad that I shouldn't be going back there, but my visa is expiring, we'll very gladly renew it. In fact, we are prepared to renew visas up to July. Then we'll review, depending on how long this shutdown goes on, but we are prepared to review them. Anybody who has got a visa which is about to expire, they can come forth, we'll renew them up to July, but they must give good reasons, obviously. If you are not from a country where there's a problem, you must give us another good reason. Don't hide behind COVID and say, I don't want to go home because of COVID, even when you know there's not a single case in the country where you come from. So we are giving that favor specifically from people who come to the high-risk countries. Why don't we completely close all the borders? This question was from, sorry? Yeah, okay. Yes, look, our aim here is to stop the spread of disease, not to annihilate human beings. Yes, we still need to eat. You still need medication. Yeah, some bit of movement is still needed. All we are doing is to slow the progress of a disease. Now, you don't slow it by completely, you know. It's like there is a snake in your house, is sitting there with your children. You don't eliminate it by putting the house on fire, because then everything will disappear. So we still need some movement. And to tell you the truth, if you close, and this is not a secret, I said it publicly, the minister in Eswatini also know, if we close all the borders between us and Eswatini, I don't think Eswatini will survive for more than 2 weeks. I don't think so. That I'm dead sure about. If we close all the borders between us and Lesotho, same thing. Look, if you are in Lesotho, to go anywhere in the world, you must pass through South Africa. Yes. Even by flight, if you are going to fly anywhere in the world, you are not only flying through South Africa, you fly to OR Tambo. That's the only place where the airlines from Maseru go to. The same as Eswatini. So we still want to be left with those which are doing trade with us. And we've achieved the goal, because this virus is not necessarily carried by goods or flight. It's human beings. You will have stopped human beings from undue movement, but trade must go on. That's also the fourth question about cargo. Why are we not stopping cargo? I've just mentioned here that, for instance, for Saldanha Bay and Mossel Bay, cargo will still go on. What we are interested in are people, because it does not necessarily follow that cargo is carrying this virus that will survive there for that long. Now, the issue of certificates of health, why do we need certificates from them? We are trying to show the difference between countries. Portugal, Hong Kong, and Singapore are medium risk. They are not like the others I've mentioned. They are medium risk countries. So we want them to apply for a visa, but in the visa requirement, we'll specifically ask for a certificate that they've tested and they are free of the virus. If that is the case, then we allow them in, because their risk is not that much. Because this is not total to say South Africa, nobody from anywhere in the world must come to South Africa. So we still want them to come, but we just want to make sure that they are free of the virus. Whereas the others from the very high impact countries, it's a total ban that perhaps they should wait a bit, they should come. And the only way to make them not come is through a visa. That you demand a visa, and if you don't want you to come, we'll deny you the visa. That's basically why we issue visas to those. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Minister Mbalula,
Mpumi speak first.
no problem. Colleagues, again, we're going to play musical microphones. Can we move the mics, please?
Thank you.
Thanks,
The ministers here present, Deputy Minister, DGs, and CEOs. The question in relation to the impact on AXA, I must indicate that we, like airlines, are facing, and global aviation generally are going to face significant reduction in revenues. Our business as AXA primarily depends on aeronautical business and non-aeronautical. On the aeronautical, we are already seeing declines. The travel bans will only make the situation worse. But in essence, we all around the globe are estimating significant decline in just global aviation. And we who depend on those revenues will suffer the first fall. The second is non-aeronautical revenue, which is our parking, our shops, retail, and other facilities that we provide at the airport. Even in that area, we're really starting to do estimates around declined revenues that we're seeing. Important to say is that we also operate as Airports Company South Africa with other partners, the third parties, who provide services on our premises to facilitate travel, and those include ground handlers and other operators. And again, in that area, we will see declines in passengers, but also declines in revenues. We've started doing the estimate of what this particular impact is, and currently we're anywhere between 2 and 5% of decline, but this is a moving target. And we must indicate that at this point, we're seeing no shows in terms of aircraft passengers. So aircraft that is scheduled to arrive with X number of passengers, our airports are reporting a reduction of 10%. Passengers are just not showing up on particular airlines. But importantly as well, with respect to that, the travel bans that other countries are issuing, including our own in South Africa, will result in a significant reduction in revenues. We have done this exercise with measured risk management, and we're looking at mitigation measures in all areas to try and reduce the impact, but we also have put together with our third parties contingency plans in place in order to alleviate the challenge. Important to say, we are required to rethink what aviation means in this sense, and the structure of our revenue generating activities into the future, because if such a epidemic of these proportions can have a devastating effect, in fact we have to rethink exactly how airports are financed and how we manage. But we're doing the maximum we can to minimize the impact. Our mitigation plans particularly will assist us in ensuring that we have minimal impact as is physically possible under these circumstances. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister Mbalula. Malungelo, you're going to have to send us an invoice. We're working you overtime.
I am actually.
Yeah, no, thank you. Just to explain that we reiterate again that tonight we work on regulations and they will be gazetted tomorrow. And we have said travel ban starts from the 18th of March, which is tomorrow. And we have been inundated by people who are here and those who are outside the country. Many countries, or some countries, have made requests to us to repatriate their people, the same as we went to Wuhan and fetch South Africans from Wuhan and back to South Africa. There are countries who are doing the same, and they will be assisted to get their citizens out of South Africa. So that is going to happen. Is it possible to quarantine? Yes, it is possible. And the Department of Health can elaborate on that. We are dealing with the travel ban. And from the briefing, it is possible that can actually be done. But in between now and the kicking in of the regulations, we are in a position when people come in to be screened and so on. Should they be found, proper procedures are actually followed. Change of crews from high-risk countries will not be allowed here in South Africa. That will not happen. With the kicking in of the regulations, it will mean that our entities, ATNS and AXA, will work together. Should we detect in a flight that there is somebody coming from wherever they come from, they will actually undertake what we said they will do to ensure that we follow the process that they have in place, where the aircraft will be redirected to a remote parking apron and the relevant authorities will be notified. We don't expect any dramatic activity because there is solidarity among nations on this matter. These processes we are undertaking are law-driven. So it's not like we talk ban people and there is no law. So we introduce regulations and all of that. That's what we are doing. So it's not a banana republic. The states still remain intact in terms of driving the process in the context of the disaster emergency that has been announced by the president. So that's what we're doing. And so our citizens can come back, and from tomorrow, if you live here and you go to the United States, you must not come back. And then this thing of traveling all over, it's gone for now. But there will still be a chance to come back home. There are many people who are in the US. I see them on Instagram. They must come back, or we'll quarantine them, or they will quarantine themselves when they come back. But it's a global solidarity. People are traveling, they had plans and all of that. Tomorrow, because we have signed the regulations in terms of maritime, which also kick in tomorrow, there are cruise ships that are redirected to come to South Africa. There are people in those ships who are, detected to be having coronavirus and all of that. And then they pass everywhere. And then they come to Cape Town and they demand to be assisted. We will announce to you tomorrow about what will happen with regard to that with Mutwaledi and Port Authority, which is the Minister of Public Enterprises, that in terms of the ban, there will be no cruising this season. Okay? If you had a plan, MSC, whatever, going elsewhere, it's gone. Now,
no honeymoon.
no honeymoon. So those things we're going to emphasize. The reason why we're taking time is because we've got to fix the regulations. So there is a ship that docked in Cape Town last night full of German people, and they wanted to disembark, get into Lufthansa, back to Germany. It's not allowed. So our regulations that are operational at the present moment will not allow that. So there will be no disembarkation and embarkation. Only goods will be allowed in those particular areas, ports of entry, like Minister Mtswaledi have explained. We need to explain this for our people to understand and to be seized with this challenge, with all of us, and globally to understand. South Africa is not immune. We are part of family of nations. We are highly affected by this. And we are putting measures to fight the scourge of this. So that's what we're doing. And that's what we're doing now in the aviation. You have seen here at the airport the work that is being done. We wanted to take you through about what is happening, but most of you have said that you are enough. You have seen everything. You've got your gloves, you've got everything. We are happy about that. Everything is operational here, the airport, AXA, and all of that. We have announced that charter flights will be redirected to international airports which have got the capacity to receive them. So that's what we're doing. And we're happy with everybody, with the staff at the airports, and with the management of AXA, with ATNS, all hands on deck. Where there are weaknesses, we're able to regroup and basically close the gaps. So there is a war room functional in most of these areas. Aviation, you've got it. Maritime, we're consolidating. Because in maritime, it is port regulator led by the Department of Transport, Port Authority, led by Department of Border Control, Mtswaledi, and then Navy and all of that in the maritime space. So we are dealing with that situation there, because when people get challenges elsewhere, they redirect to South Africa. You must understand that every day cruise ships pass, they don't stop, but because of coronavirus, if somebody gets coronavirus infected somewhere in the deep seas, they look around, they say, which is the nearest place? They say South Africa, let's go hack Matorokis. They come to South Africa. Now, we are saying in South Africa too, we've got the regulations. No disembarkation, no cruise shipping, and all of that. Now, we've been saying these things, but you see other people insist that we must go on a cruise ship. It's not going to allow, colleagues. Law will be enforced, because we know the consequences that come with that. So it is President have announced, we're operationalizing. That's all what we are doing. Thank you very much.
Yeah, there is something I wish to say, if you allow me. Yes, Malungelo, you think I go
The reflection of duties now, Malu.
Yeah, I just want to clarify this whole issue of closure of borders. By the way, we're not closing the borders only because we want to protect South Africans against our neighbors. We are also protecting our neighbors against ourselves. In fact, we are the ones who have got more of the disease than these neighboring countries. And it won't be a very good thing for the disease to start spreading from South Africa to our neighboring countries. So when we say we are closing so many borders, it's not for our own sake only. It's also for the sake of our neighbors. They also need to be protected. That's why the ministers in the neighboring countries supported us so much. The other thing I forgot to mention, in the 35 ports of entry, firstly, let me say Home Affairs officials in all the 72 ports of entry, they are 1,400 number. Now, in the 35 ports of entry, they account for only 90 of the Home Affairs officials. Now, when you close them, it means you have got 90 extra hands in the remaining 18 ports of entry. For instance, in Beitbridge, which many of you and the members of the public like complaining about, there are 124 officials from Home Affairs. We are going to send 20 more from these borders which are closed, because then it means Beitbridge might be a little bit busier. So we are going to send 20 more people. Now, Port Health has informed us that out of the Port Health officials that are there checking temperatures, they've hired 90 extra. And I think they said they were starting their work yesterday. Throughout the whole week, some will be taking over. So those Port Health workers will also be redeployed to many of these ports that have not been closed, so that we have got more people to try and check whoever is coming in. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ministers. I know that we're pressed for time because you're Cape Town bound. Minister alluded to the fact that we're focusing on maritime tomorrow, so we need to make our way to Cape Town. Is it safe to say that we can conclude?
Yes, please.
They can leave. I can remain alone for the whole night because I'm not going to Cape Town tonight.
Okay, we did make them wait, so I think let's allow for an extra round of questioning. I was mindful also because I know that they need to go and file, but it seems that they are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Haibo. Okay, I think let's allow for the last round of questions.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
We'll be fast this time.
Minister Mzalidi, 2 questions for you.
From
Horisani Sitole from SABC Radio News. Minister, question number 1, I would like to know about the UK visa. Is it going to be permanent? Because we also have to pay to go to them. Is it going to be the same? And then number 2, it's about one of the border posts in Limpopo that I would like to ask about. If you recall very well, majority of the ZZ2 workers come from Mozambique, like more than 80%. And they use that border post to send food and all these things. Did you consider such? Because it seems like we're going to be making people starve on the other side.
which border post?
It's
Pafuri or
Pafuri. Yeah. Thank you.
Right behind you. Thank you.
Hi, Nomvelo Chilivera from News 24. First question for Minister Mbalula. Do we expect domestic travel to be affected? One, and are there measures in place to restrict travel internally? And the other question, last question is, will there be any other repatriation efforts like the one that happened from Wuhan?
Hi, it's Dumi again from Tourism Update and Travel News Weekly. My questions are from Minister Motsoaledi. How will the travel ban affect citizens, South African citizens, with dual citizenship who will travel outside of South Africa on a foreign passport? And my second question is...
Just come again, people who live here and go...
Dual citizenship. South African residents who have dual citizenships who often travel outside of the country on foreign passports. And I'd like to also ask, you spoke mainly of long-term visas. I'd like to know about people with short-term visas, those who are here for leisure, for holiday. How will they be affected? I know of 2 people who have to go back to their home countries, and the other one is afraid to go back home because home is Italy, and they would like to stay here. Will they be allowed to renew their visas to stay for longer, even though they're not on a long-term visa? Thank you.
Good evening, it's Zina Tilia from Salam Media. My question is for Minister Mbalula. What preventative measures will be implemented for public transport such as taxis and trains?
Thanks so much. I think let's go to Mr. Apple, and then I see the hand here in front.
Good evening, Ministers. Michael from ENCA. I don't know if I'm just not getting this answer, so forgive my ignorance here. The travel ban is in fact not an outright ban. I'm over here. It's basically you can travel dependent on whether or not you get a visa. I want to know very simply, in as simple language as possible, please, if you're from a high-risk country, are you saying don't bother applying for visas, you're not going to get it? Or you can get it dependent on whether you give us a medical certificate which says I'm corona-free? And Minister Gordon, is SAA flying to any of these high-risk destinations? Thank you.
The hand with the blue glove, and then right in front with the brown jacket, and then I think we're good to go.
Thank you. Bonga Lulane from EWN again. Partially covered by Michael, but maybe I should rephrase it like this. Mr. Mbalula, you said something about, here sir, when people are found in a flight, I don't know if I misunderstood you, and if they didn't declare or said if they are from a high-risk country, the plane will be redirected, or people who violate the ban will be redirected to somewhere where the government has, you know...
You want to explain that?
Yeah, where some government has, yeah. So I just want to get clarity on that because we want to report ineffectually on this issue. And Mr. Gordon, also touching from Michael's questions, SA is at a precarious position as it is right now. You've alluded to that. When you're saying direct flights, you're reviewing those issues. What does that mean exactly? Do we mean we have a decision in the next week, or are you dependent on the high risk or the international airlines that do have direct flights with South Africa regarding if they can or cannot come in the country? Thank you.
Okay. Last question.
Hi, good evening, ministers. Mathilde Boussion for the French TV5. I just wanted to clarify something about the status of France because it was not mentioned directly by the president on Sunday. So can you clarify and confirm which category does France belongs to? And the other quick question is for AXA. You mentioned already a decline in revenue. Do you already also have information about the decline? Can you quantify the decline in traffic in like the beginning of March at the Tembo or the airports?
Give AXA to start first.
Just quickly for Minister Mbalula, the metro rail trains carry thousands of commuters almost every day. And what will happen there? What is happening there? Is this not high risk as well?
Thank you.
Okay, shall we begin with AXA ministers? Or we're happy that side? Sisonde is the mic.
No, there is a question to AXA.
Correct, there were two questions directed to AXA.
Thank you for the two questions. The first one relates to domestic travel internally. Our state of readiness of AXA has been actually quite early in the process. We were the first ones to be triggered to make preparations for the coronavirus, and we started off probably by even the 2nd of March activating the measures in all our airports, and that actually includes prioritizing the international airports such as OR Tambo, King Shaka and Cape Town, but we've actually implemented and are implementing this across our entire network of airports across the country. So that would cater for the domestic travel in cases where people are traveling from here and then connecting to other destinations in the country. The second issue about estimates of decline in traffic, we've got some estimates which we can't consolidate the figure because in essence there's, as I indicated earlier, we have a bigger problem of no-shows. So that even if airlines are scheduled to arrive, in certain instances we're not always getting the accurate number of passengers arriving. So that's just a moving target. We're collecting the information, but as we go along, we'll probably be able to give a clearer picture, let's say by month end, around the direct impacts on traffic for a slightly longer period than daily. But we've got figures and we just need to consolidate them into comprehensive. The no-shows are done daily and we're getting daily reports because that's easy to do on no-shows. But we will consolidate that and provide it to you at a later stage. Thanks.
So we'll move from left to right. I think the one point that we need to emphasize, both on the aviation side but elsewhere as well, we at the beginning of the epidemiological curve. In other words, this situation in South Africa and in other countries as well is going to evolve every 24 hours. Right? So the question on France, for example, if you ask the same question 72 hours ago, we probably would have said France is a medium risk country. France itself has placed itself in a high-risk category. We haven't yet. So I think we've got to watch this developments twice a day, and sometimes more often as we go forward. So that's the first point. The second is that as the situation develops, you'll find that both foreign airlines and South African Airways and other South African airlines will have two things happening. The one is people who might have booked to come back in 10 days' time would want to come back tomorrow morning or tomorrow night. So people are bringing their bookings forward so that they can get back into the country before the travel ban takes effect, or before those countries that they find themselves in greater difficulty than they currently are. Which means that you're going to have what are called good load factors. Most seats are going to be filled in the, say, next week or so. But after that, all the other airlines around the world are experiencing low load factors. It means they're not selling as many tickets, as you would call it, or seats as they would call it, as they traditionally would. And thirdly, as a consequence, airlines will have to work out whether it's profitable and commercially viable in order to fly a particular route. So what an airline might be doing today might not be what it is doing in a week's time. So those are some of the dynamic changes, if you like, that are currently happening. Mike's question in terms of where does SAA fly? In terms of high-risk countries, it flies to London, so it's the UK, the US for a start. So those two are countries that we directly, or SAA directly flies to at the moment. And I think those flights will also go through the same dynamic that global airlines are going through, which is peaks at a certain point in time and then a fall off. And then each of the airlines will be asking somebody to rescue them, or they will go through some consolidation process that they've actually experienced before in their existence as well. The last point about repatriation is the point that Minister Mbalula made, that South Africans are saying we want to come back, advancing their previous bookings to an earlier date, getting onto an SAA flight and coming back, or getting onto other flights operated by other airlines and coming back. But the phenomenon that SAA is experiencing now, which I mentioned earlier on, is where a foreign airline might actually say, we don't think it's viable for us to fly this route. Can you take our passengers and fly them to us instead? And that's the switch that we are talking about that is currently being experienced. If you ask these questions 24 hours from now, the answers could very well be very different from now. Thank you.
Sorry, Minister, before you pass on the mic, a colleague from France wanted you to reiterate your stance that South Africa has not placed France on a high-risk list. However, France has placed itself. Just for clarity.
No, in the President's statement, the countries are clearly listed.
Yes.
And they're in Minister Mbalula's statement as well. France does not appear on that list.
Can I correct?
Yeah, okay. But I'm just saying that's the position as it stands.
Yeah, yes, I need to correct that. It's true that it was not appearing on the President's statement. We don't sit and choose which is a high-risk country. The high-risk countries are named by the WHO, the World Health Organization, in application of international health.
As a former Minister of Health, he can talk about that.
Yes, so the list, we obtain it from the World Health Organization. We do not come up with our own list. The fact that France was not mentioned during the President, it was just an oversight by the people who were preparing the document. It's definitely there.
Okay.
I can assure you. Yes.
So they belong to the same category as Britain?
Yes, exactly.
Yes, got something to. No, him. Or you ask him to clarify something first. Yeah. Yes. Didn't you? EWM clarify more.
Thank you
That
so
is
much.
called a
Just a
Tusha,
few
Tusha,
more
that is
microphones to move
Let
down.
our party.
Colleagues, I'm going to
Yes.
ask, just as we're busy moving the microphones down, if you can also sanitize. There's hand sanitizers as well. So those who are using the handheld as well, thank you.
When you go to hospital, you sanitize once, not every second. We'll ask the DG and the ATNS to speak on the issues in relation to what you are asking so that we are accurate on that. Yeah.
No. What the EWN is asking, it's in part of the contingency plans. The plans say, if you are from these high-risk countries, after the regulations are gazetted and passed, and the ministerial order is issued, that order by procedure has got to be communicated to the affected countries and to say, and to the affected corresponding airlines of those countries to say they shouldn't come. However, should, even after that has occurred, one airline from one of the high-risk countries gets airborne and flies and arrives here, and we can't turn them back, probably because perhaps they don't have enough fuel to go back or whatever. And by international civil aviation regulations, well, we should allow them to land. That's what we were referring to and what ministers say. ATNS, which allows flights to land and to take off and all of that, and which also tells them which runway to land on and so on and so forth, can then direct in that way to say the normal protocol that they put in place for high-risk flights and all of that is to put them at the furthest of the runways and to have them taxi the longer way to a specific designated apron that APSA has set aside for purposes of putting such high-risk flights on. Once they are there on that tarmac, the aircraft is quickly escorted, make sure nobody gets out and so on. And the relevant authorities, including the National Institute for Communicable Diseases and police, everybody then gets to surround that aircraft and we process it as such. We deal with it as a rogue.
And
So
then
I
it
think
goes
that
back,
is-
and then it goes back.
Most probably, we have to perhaps refuel them, whichever the case might be, but we have to send it back. So I think that is the issue. Okay.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. The first question from Ndade Stroll about whether this is permanent, about UK, because we also go there with visas. Nothing we are doing is permanent now. We are fighting a disease. The president might stand later on, I don't know, in a month or a week and say, you know,
War is over.
Yes, and they say the war is over. And in that case, it's Marumo Fasi. Now, I know why you are asking that question. You are asking a question because of the principle of reciprocity. You know, where one country give you a visa and you reciprocate. It works like that in theory. In the real world, it doesn't work like that. It's not food. Yes, you may reciprocate to one country and get injured or injure yourself, if you know what I mean. The reason that I'm saying so is not because of being a coward. When you decide whether to give a visa or not to a country, you look at three things. You look at the sovereignty of your country and the security of the people in that country. But you also look at the developmental needs of your country. You might be chasing sovereignty and security, but curtail developmental needs of your country, which is also not good. And the third thing you look for is for the stability. If I take this decision, will there be stability in my country, or will something start getting unstable? Once you decide those, and it's the manner in which you mix these three is not straightforward. Then you decide. So Britain, UK, not Britain, UK has demanded visa from us. They were not demanding them before. They demanded because they argued that our passports were easily forged and all that. We have changed. We are now producing a very strong passport, by the way, very safe and secured. We will apply to them to see if they can unban us. But now we are doing it to them, not because we are reciprocating their ban, but because of the disease. Yes. Now Pafuri, unfortunately, there are going to be inconveniences. Not everything we're doing we like. But Pafuri is one of the border posts that when we check them against our two criteria of no economic activity through them, no port health presence, it was one of them, and that's why we had to close it. Now, there's a question from News 24 whether there are going to be any more repatriations like Wuhan. At the moment, I'm not aware of that. I'm in the committee, but I don't think it's in the pipeline. We have never heard about it. If there is such a thing, it will be communicated. The South Africans who travel with 2 passports because they've got dual nationalities, if they come here and they are from one of the high-risk countries, they'll be handled like a person from that high-risk country. Yes. If they are carrying the passport here and they say, now I'm going to that other country to which I'm a citizen, you can't stop a person from going to their home. They will come, but when they come back, we'll handle them like a citizen from that country. Yes, that's how we'll do it. The short-term visas, I've already explained when somebody asked me what about the visa which expires, and I said we are prepared to renew them. And I was just giving an example about long-term visas, basically. But even short-term, if somebody say I come from Italy, I don't want to go back, it will be unreasonable for us to say go, even when we know there are problems there. Because as Minister Mbalula has said, the world is fighting this in solidarity. There's a solidarity between nations. And if one nation said, please keep my people there. By the way, China kept our people for a long time and kept them safe. And they are in Limpopo. They didn't say go back home. They kept them safe. They quarantined them in Wahun. That's why they are all negative. And they are in Limpopo under quarantine. We are just waiting for 14 days. They were kept by China for us. So if another country asks us, please keep my people there, we definitely are not going to refuse. We'll do so. International solidarity. Mr. Appel, I think you are right, Michael. Maybe this issue is not very clear. Yes, the answer is if you come from the high-risk country, what word did you use? Don't bother about applying for a visa. Yes, that's what you said. That's like that. But the reason that we explain about these visas, we found it to be the only mechanism. It doesn't necessarily mean that when President Ramaphosa on Sunday was speaking, every person in Europe was listening. And they will know the following day. Or every person in the UK or every person in China. Even after the press conferences, even now as I'm sitting here, not everybody is listening. They may just wake up and go. But now we are announcing from now onwards, we will need a passport. Not a passport, a visa, in order to track and see. We are putting a lot of fire walls in this war. For instance, one of the instruments we have, which many people might not have been aware of, is what they call the APP, Advanced Passenger Process. Yes, many people were not aware of that. I also became aware when I arrived in Home Affairs. When I was in health, I thought the only people who work during the night for 24 hours are health workers. I discovered that that's not true in Home Affairs. The people who are in the APP, they work for 24 hours. And what is APP? Any country, any flight, before it leaves any part of the world, to come here, just before it's airborne, they give us the list just before. It won't leave until we see the list and say, we approve of all these passengers who are here on the list. They can come to our country. The people who do that are APP, and they work for 24 hours. They say this plane is about to. Many of you who have been in a flight, I'm sure you are aware, before it departs, there's somebody who crashes in with a list and they exchange with the pilots and sign something. That list is immediately sent electronically and close the door and wait for a few minutes. It's because they are sending that list electronically to us. And the team in the APP can read and say, hey, there's a guy there called Malungelo, take him out. He must not come to South Africa. And there's no way the plane will leave. They are going to stop and disembark you and say, no, South Africa doesn't want you. We do have that APP. Now, what we have done now because of this, this is what you call, yes. What we have done now because of this COVID-19, we have now put up a team under APP, a team of 6 people. They work in shifts of 12 hours each. The moment that plane leaves, we haven't seen anybody. You know, when I said there's a guy there called Malungelo, it might be because we've been flagged by Interpol and you are very obvious. But there are people there who are not obvious, but we are giving their profiles. This team, let's say you are moving from Heathrow, they've got 10 to 12 hours to check your profile. By the time you arrive here, we already know about you. We are waiting. That's what that team is doing, to check one by one where this one, because you might have lied about your origins because of the passport you are having. So that team will start your profile, where could you have been, etc. By the time you arrive here, they will be able to tell somebody at the airport, then go to such and such a flight, check for so and so, bring them out, we have got issues with them, and we start dealing with those issues. But in short, Michael, if you come from the high-risk countries, you're not gonna come. But the passport is our control measure. That's the only control measure we have got really. We don't have any other one. Perhaps the other firewall is the control measure by the Department of Transport, who will say the plane from there must never land in the country. But what if they allowed it to land and there is somebody there who we think should not have been? Then it's us in Home Affairs via the visa and the passport who now moves into check. So it's a lot of layers of protection from this. The issue of direct flights, yes, Minister Kaudan has answered it. And we have also answered the issue of friends, that it was not there on that list, but it definitely is one of those on the high risk. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Shall we move the microphones one last time? In interest of time, Minister Mbalula will close first.
Yes, no, domestic travels. There is no restrictions on domestic travels, but you will be encouraged to limit unnecessary movement. Parliament tomorrow, we are going for the last time, and then we are told we'll have to operate from where we are. I think there will be bigger announcements coming in that direction. So that thing of early in the morning, afternoon, back and forth, limit. Stay at home, work at home, if it is possible. Limit many movements. And many parties with 500. Sunday was the last party I attended of Black Coffee. So, with many people there. Very risky situation. So, no more parties and no more nightclubs is coming away, and no more taverns. Stay at home, limit social distance.
Taverns close at 6.
Yeah, taverns close at 6. Abantu baga 4 to 6, 6 to 6 is over. Now, we love these things, we love this life, but we've got to restrict ourselves in terms of this. So domestic travels, depending on the high risk of this, like Minister Gordon have said, nothing is static. Things change over time. There is a command center chaired by the president. He is clued up together with his ministers and those who are a part of the command center, transport and all of that, to say, where are we? What is the state of affairs? The bigger announcements will come from that office of the president. All what we do as ministers is to operationalize and implement what is the command. And the commander-in-chief is the president of the country. And we need to be very ecstatic that how South Africans have responded to this. Very positive, taking decisions even before the drastic measures were announced. Decisions were taken, no to jazz festival in Cape Town, no to this and that. PSL took decisions. After the president, everyone is responding. So we're not at each other's throat. It's not a political issue. It's a monumental disaster that is facing humanity in the 21st century that require all hands on deck. And that's what South Africans And everyone across walk of life have been responding to this. Trains, we have announced measures. But I can tell you right now, we've got big challenges. We are going to have to take drastic measures as transport in the trains. If people don't comply, we will stop movement of trains. We've got a big challenge now with PRASA and what we're doing in terms of refurbishment, modernization program, getting new trains. We're faced with that challenge. People must not cramp in the trains. That's it. But trains will be sanitized, and that's what is going to happen. Taxi ranks will be sanitized, and I will demonstrate that to you. You will have seen Santiago today. You will see them tomorrow at Wanderers. We're coming to Baragwanath. We have met with all the MECs because transport is a co-current function. I'm sitting here, there is a mayor there with his space who will announce big things and so on about transport, but we've narrowed that because there were big announcements that were made that EBET is gonna be stopped and the people must no longer blow and all of that. We have clarified that. There is no scientific account that blowing EBET will lead to the infection of coronavirus. We have made it clear to our MECs and those who made announcements about such, drink and driving will be tested. No retreat on that because the method we are applying is very scientific and it will not infect you. And it's self-cleansing. We can demonstrate to you how that is the case. So we're dealing with that with the MECs and we're implementing that. So taxis, we're working with taxi organizations, buses about this work. We are having bigger consultations getting into the weekend and even beyond. We'll be full force at PRASA on the trains, ensuring that people abide by the law in relation to the trains, congestion and all of that. So we're addressing that and the PRASA is responding. Up to last night, we met with all our entities. Late last night, we received a brief. They gave us their action plan, which is implemented as we speak right away. So government, including our entities and all those who are involved, we are working with them. And we're gonna intensify going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Ministers, Deputy Minister, DG, CEOs, ladies and gentlemen of the media, much appreciated once again. Have a good evening.